So those of you familiar with my channel would be forgiven for thinking that I'm a bitter, cynical drunkard living a bleak existence of booze and unfettered rage at the world. And while that's almost certainly true, there's definitely more to me than sarcastic, alcohol-fueled YouTube rants. There's, a lot more. There are things in this world that I enjoy and appreciate. One of them is Star Wars, and because I'm Scottish, another one is fighting. So it seems only logical to combine those two things and produce a countdown of my favourite movie fight scenes, so here we are. Welcome to the Critical Drinker's Top 5 Star Wars fight scenes. Pour yourself a couple of shots and let's get into this. Number 5. Finn vs Kylo Ren. I know, right? I was as surprised as you to be including The Force Awakens in this list, but what can I say? This is a fight scene I really enjoyed. It's easy to rubbish this movie as a lame, unimaginative J.J. Abrams reboot of A New Hope, and while that's true, it does contain moments that really stuck with me, and one of them is the lightsaber duel between Finn and Kylo Ren. When you break down this scene and look at how it's actually constructed, you'll find it's a solid, well-choreographed fight, shot in an unusual environment between two very unevenly matched enemies, and it works. The peaceful woodland setting, the snowy backdrop, the low light conditions and the fiery glow of the lightsabers all combine together to deliver a surprisingly visceral and compelling fight. This is a scene where people can and will get hurt, and it keeps you on edge because you don't really know what's gonna happen. I really love scenes like this when a reluctant character takes up arms and makes a stand against a far stronger opponent, knowing they're probably gonna lose but doing it anyway because they believe in their cause. How well they actually do in the fight is less important than the fact they chose to do it in the first place. Finn's a character that spent most of the movie trying to run away and escape from trouble. He's not a hero, and generally he just wants to avoid conflict altogether, but this is the moment when he finally decides to stand and fight, and he does it to protect a girl he barely knows. It's a nice character moment for Finn, and it made me root for him. It marks the conclusion of his journey from frightened coward to reluctant ally, and finally to a brave and determined hero willing to lay down his life for what's right. Wow, I really hope the next movie doesn't totally undo this kind of important character development. This scene also does a great job of depicting lightsabers as genuinely frightening and powerful weapons that most characters struggle to even hold, never mind actually take into combat. Finn's not fighting with any kind of technique or skill here, he's just swinging wildly at anything he can, desperately trying to block Kylo's attacks and hoping to score a lucky hit. Every blow seems significant, and even Kylo's cross-guard lightsaber actually serves a useful purpose when he uses it to burn through Finn's shoulder. It looks and sounds agonizingly painful, and it makes you feel for him even more knowing he's taken a beating. Ultimately, Kylo Ren gets the better of Finn and seriously injures him, but the distraction buys time for Rey to recover and take up the fight herself. It proves the point that even though he's untrained and unprepared for a confrontation like this, and he didn't have what it took to win, Finn's sacrifice ultimately saved the day anyway. Nice one, mate. Number 4. Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn vs Darth Maul. There aren't many people that hold the prequel trilogy in high regard, least of all me, but I do at least recognise some of the things they did well, and one of those things is the lightsaber battle at the end of The Phantom Menace. Why, you might ask? Well, because it's a technical masterclass in fight choreography between three very competent fighters that's also expertly paced, perfectly scored, and features some genuinely good character moments. Let me explain. The fight starts off as a 2-on-1 battle between Darth Maul and the two Jedi. All three of them are good fighters, but Maul's able to hold his own against them despite their advantage in numbers, proving what a powerful and dangerous enemy he really is. The choreography is perfectly done here. It's fast and elegant with no awkward breaks in the action when someone misses their cue. Unlike other movies I could mention. Maul quickly realises that the only way to win is to divide and conquer, so he manages to separate them between a force field, which results in a short break in the action. The movie's smart enough to recognise that one long continuous fight would quickly become boring, so you need to break it up into smaller chunks, give the audience time to absorb it all. And it's here that the character moment kicks in. The upshot is that we're all trapped in a big laser corridor that won't unlock for a few seconds. Obi-Wan's too far away to help, so Qui-Gon knows he's going to have to face Darth Maul alone. And it's interesting to watch their actions during this little break. Maul's pacing back and forth, filled with anger and eager to resume the fight. Obi-Wan's trapped and impotent, desperate to help his master but unable to do anything except watch. And Qui-Gon sits down to meditate, rest his body and focus his mind, calmly preparing himself for what's coming. This scene perfectly sums up the characters of these three men. The wise and competent mentor, focused but aging. The eager and idealistic student, young but inexperienced. The vengeful and aggressive Sith Lord, ruthless but overconfident. The only downside to this fight is the climax and the inevitable defeat of Maul, which felt kinda cheap and contrived compared to everything that had built up to it. I'd rather have seen Obi-Wan lose his temper and deliver a more brutal, less technical beatdown. It might have been nice to play with the idea that he was tempted by the dark side because he was still young and emotional, and that's one of the reasons he proved to be a poor mentor to Anakin. But otherwise I still hold this fight up as a solid, well-executed and surprisingly intelligent lightsaber duel in an otherwise disappointing turd of a movie, and it earns a well-deserved 4th place on this list. Number 3, Luke vs Darth Vader from The Empire Strikes Back. Let's be honest with each other here, there's no way I could do a countdown like this without mentioning the lightsaber battle in Empire. It's the first time Luke and Vader go head to head in a lightsaber battle, and it ends with a pretty memorable exchange between the two men.
No, I am your father.
But the fight itself is what I want to focus on here. Luke comes into it filled with youthful passion, determination to rescue his friends, and maybe a bit of overconfidence in himself. He's been training hard with Yoda, he's growing stronger with the Force, and he thinks he's ready to take on an opponent like Vader. But he quickly learns how wrong he was, and so do we. Vader really puts him through the mill in this fight, easily dominating the encounter right from the start. He's not out to kill Luke, he's out to capture and recruit him. He's basically toying with him, shrugging off Luke's increasingly desperate attacks and dealing out punishing damage when Luke tries to resist. He's just this relentless, unstoppable force that keeps coming no matter what you do. It's an uncomfortable scene to watch. You're expecting Luke to score a hard-fought but triumphant victory like he did in A New Hope, but instead you find out he's totally out of his depth and soon he's in real trouble. This is how a movie can cleverly subvert our expectations while staying consistent to the characters and the world they exist in. It's a shame a certain round-headed filmmaker didn't take more notice of this. Anyway, Vader keeps pushing him back, literally driving him into a corner as the fight nears its climax, and then this happens. That's what I'd call a bad day out. And just when you think it can't get any worse for Luke, Vader hits him with one of the most iconic lines in all of film history.
No, I am your father.
By the time it's all over, you're left feeling emotionally drained. It's almost hard to take it all in. It's a brilliant example of how adversity is part of growth, and how a crushing defeat can actually make a character stronger and wiser in the long run. I'm just saying is all. Number 2, Vader versus the Rebel Troopers in Rogue One. Now, despite my general dislike of the Disney Star Wars movies, I actually thought Rogue One was a pretty decent film, all things considered. It fit into the wider Star Wars canon without screwing things up too badly, and even though the main character was as dull as a rainy Scottish morning in December, it featured some pretty exciting moments, and we were all pleased when the rebels escaped with the Death Star plans at the end. Then this happened. This one scene demonstrates exactly how you treat an OT character with the respect and reverence they're due, and what better character is there than Darth Vader? Everyone knows what's about to play out, but the manner in which it happens took us all by surprise. The rebel troopers unleash everything they have, opening fire with a hail of blaster fire, but Vader just wades right through it, deflecting blaster bolts with his lightsaber, tearing weapons right out of their grip, picking up enemies, force choking them and tossing them around like rag dolls. He's an absolute monster in this scene, utterly unstoppable and terrifying. You can almost feel the fear and panic growing in the rebel troopers sabers as they desperately try to escape, and Vader closes in, hacking down and murdering absolutely everything in his path. It's a brilliant epic fight scene that proves to me there are at least some people at Lucasfilm that still get it, and who still have some respect for the original trilogy. You might say this scene gave me a new hope. And number 1, Luke versus Vader from Return of the Jedi. As much as some people like to dump on Return of the Jedi, for obvious reasons, it's a movie that contains some of the most powerful moments in the entire saga, and the top of that list for me is the final battle between Luke and Darth Vader. The fight really comes in 2 stages. The first stage when Vader's trying to provoke Luke into giving in to his anger, and he keeps resisting. He's dueling Vader with skill and determination, but it's clear that neither man wants to beat the other. It's a power play. Vader's trying to tempt Luke to the dark side by taunting and threatening him, and Luke's trying to persuade Vader to come back to the light. It's a battle of words and ideas as much as lightsabers, and neither man can gain the upper hand. It's only when Luke goes into hiding and Vader starts hunting for him that the fight finally comes to its climax. When Vader taunts him about his failures, you can see Luke struggling to hold it together, and we know what's coming. And the threat that Leia might turn to the dark side is what finally breaks him. This isn't some carefully choreographed dance or a CGI extravaganza. This is a primal explosion of absolute rage and fury. It's 2 guys who've been on a collision course for 3 epic movies finally going at it with everything they have. Luke isn't thinking about strategy or technique anymore. He's just swinging wildly at his enemy, missing and hitting walls and pillars, laying into him with blow after blow, driving him backwards with every step. This huge, unstoppable, dominant monster who toyed with Luke and defeated him so easily in Empire is now being driven back in the face of his overwhelming anger. And when Vader finally starts to buckle, Luke doesn't stop. He's just hammering him into the ground, not even thinking about what he's doing anymore. Only when he severs Vader's hand and he disarms him does he finally stop, seeing the man's robotic arm and recognizing the same injury Vader inflicted on him. The music, the performance from Hamill, the cinematography, the dramatic impact of this scene, it's all played to absolute perfection. A son pitted against his own father, finally defeating him only to realise he's now about to become him. And in the end, throwing aside his weapon in defiance of the Emperor, accepting his own death rather than turning to the dark side. It's the culmination of everything Luke has learned over the past 3 movies and the perfect resolution of his character arc. Rarely have I seen a character's development come down to a moment that plays out as well as this one. For all these reasons, I genuinely hold this up as one of the greatest ever fight scenes, not just in Star Wars but in all of cinematic history. Not for its style or its pace or its complexity, but for the sheer raw emotional impact it delivers. It's a scene that gives me chills every time I see it, a scene that epitomizes everything classic Star Wars represents, not to mention everything the sequel trilogy seems to have forgotten. And for that, I consider this my number 1 Star Wars fight scene. And that's all I have for today. Go away now.